WNST, Tass in Baltimore. Baseball all week, and the Blue Jays coming in, and of course the Yankees next week, and the Orioles have managed to extend their season longer. One thing for sure, I am hoping fake football doesn't get extended any further beyond Bourbon Street after the game on Thursday night, and hopefully all the Ravens, all the Saints get up from every single tackle. Fletcher Mackel's been covering the Saints for a long time as a sports anchor at WDSU down in beautiful New Orleans, where the rain bands from this hideous storm are coming in, and some of the memories are coming in. And I know I've shared a lot of memories with folks like Brian Billick, who were there along with me, my wife, for Katrina. This guy was down there, as it says on your Twitter at Fletcher at WDSU, Fletcher Mackel, you're NOLA all the way. So I know everybody down in that part of the world has a real lump in their throat seeing all of this and knowing that you guys really aren't out of harm's way just yet.
No, we're actually dealing with some rain right now. Obviously, what's going on in Houston is really horrific and terrible, and brings back a lot of bad memories for people here in New Orleans, because a lot of the visuals that we're seeing are eerily reminiscent of what happened here during Katrina. We could have some minor flooding in New Orleans, southwest Louisiana, over in Cajun country, Acadiana, the Lafayette area. They'll probably be more affected, although we are getting some of those feeder bands, so to say, as this storm pushes through Texas in heads, more inland. So it actually is raining pretty significantly right now as we do this interview. And after 12 years ago, obviously any time a storm or any type of flood issue can affect New Orleans, everybody is on a heightened sense of alert, if you will.
Well, I mean, you were like on duty when that happened, right? Like literally you weren't a sports guy anymore. You were just sort of on the team, and I've seen what's happened to the journalists over there, and whole buildings getting white. I mean, it's it really is eerily reminiscent, but for people that have lived through it, I mean, my wife and I evacuated that morning. We were so it was the greatest decision we ever made, literally, was to leave on a morning flight instead of an afternoon flight, because the afternoon flight never existed. And I don't know what would have happened to us. We were staying downtown on, off of Poydras, and, for all of you who wrote it out there, it's, I tell you what, dude, you and I can get together about a lot of things. I can't think of anything less significant than the fourth preseason football game, or more significant than the storm, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Look, that game was played on a Friday night in the preseason, and Katrina hit New Orleans in the early hours on Monday morning, late Sunday night, Monday morning. And so that was, I think, a time when things took a turn for the worse, so to say, as far as New Orleans is concerned. That during that game on Friday night, that preseason game against the Ravens, is when everybody knew it's coming for New Orleans and it's going to be big. And so late on Friday night and then all day into Saturday and Sunday, that was when mandatory evacuations were ordered, and it was again a really difficult time here in New Orleans when that storm hit our city.
Well, let's get on to some football. That is why I called. I don't know what we're looking to accomplish in these fourth games so much as factors on the field, and certainly nobody wants to get anybody hurt. And, we've seen what's happened even last week with the New England Patriots and Edelman, amongst others. We had Tyrod Taylor get hit on the head here very early in the game, and that's, tragedy for the Bills and how they're trying to begin their season. Where are the Saints at this point? I mean, that division's incredible with Carolina 2 years ago and Atlanta and their dominance last year, all of this hard knocks business coming out of Tampa. I know one thing, it's Peyton and it's Breeze, and it's same as it's ever been, and I think if the defense is better there, they'll have a chance to win 10 games this year, right?
Yeah, look, I agree with you, and the encouraging thing for the New Orleans Saints has been the defense in the second and third preseason games. Realize that the Saints have put together 8 consecutive shutout quarters, which is unheard of for a defense that has been historically bad the last 3 years. So here in New Orleans, there's a big enough body of work, we know. If Sean Payton is calling the plays and designing the offense, he's an offensive innovator and going to be remembered as one of the greatest offensive coaches in NFL history. Drew Brees is a first ballot Hall of Famer and one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history statistically. By the time it's all said and done, he statistically may be the best. So offensively, the Saints are always going to be right there. For 12 straight years, they finished in the top 3 in total offense. Defense is always the Achilles heel. Well, Dennis Allen, the coordinator, the former Raiders head coach, who was here with Sean Payton before he became the Raiders head coach and is now back, since things didn't work out there, is a really good coach. And finally, they've invested so much defense, it seems like maybe they've turned a corner. I mean, they have a ton of high draft picks. It's not for lack of effort with the Saints when it comes to trying to acquire defensive talent. It's just that they haven't been able to put the pieces together. And I know it's just the preseason, but this preseason, they're second overall in total defense. They're second in the league in sacks. They're first in pass breakup. So, again, it's just preseason, but it's encouraging knowing that the reason why the Saints have struggled the last 3 years, even though Drew Brees has passed for 5,000 yards every single year, is the fact that defensively they couldn't stop anybody. It seems like maybe they're on the right path. And yeah, I think a lot of people here are looking at them, at least in this area that cover this team, and saying they could be a 10 or 11 win team, even in a division that has a ton of talent.
Fletcher Mackel covers all things sports in New Orleans. You can find him at Fletcher WDSU and WDSU TV down there in Louisiana. And, you know, for Peyton, you know, every year there's, well, he's going to go take $1 billion and run this team, or Jerry's going to get rid of him and this bring in, you know, he's been rumored a lot of different places. And I would say the one thing is just the shuttling in of defensive coordinators. And I've said this week, the Rob Ryan era was my favorite, and I know there was a limited amount of success there. But to your point, not for lack of trying, but there's been a lot of personnel shuffled in there, especially on the other side of the ball that's not Peyton's specialty, in trying to sort of button up that side of the ball, right?
Look, Sean Payton and Drew Brees got here in 2006. Sean Payton has basically been the head coach and offensive coordinator, even though he has a coordinator that has that title in Pete Carmichael. They have had 5 different defensive coordinators. Gary Gibbs, Sean Payton brought with him from the Dallas Cowboys. Then it was Greg Williams, and that was the best run of success that the Saints ever had here before things went sideways, bounty situation. Steve Spagnuolo lasted 1 year. Rob Ryan got fired after 2.5 years, and now it's been Dennis Allen's job last year and now this year. So 5 defensive coordinators is not good when you've been here, you know, just over 10 years. But again, it certainly seems like, just judging from the preseason, they have finally put some pieces in place in the high draft picks that they used. It seems like these guys are ready to. I'm not saying they're going to be, you know, like those great Baltimore defenses that you all have seen that helped you all to championships, but they don't have to be that. If the Saints defense can just be middle of the pack and not in the bottom 3 to 5, this is a playoff team, and they've proven that. When the Saints won the Super Bowl, their defense was just middle of the pack. Now, they were opportunistic, forcing turnovers, but they weren't special defense. In 2011, when the Saints went 13-3 and rewrote the record book offensively, their defense was middle of the pack, and that was Greg Williams' final year. And so this defense doesn't have to be great. Believe it or not, the best Saints defense was actually Rob Ryan's first year in 2013 when the Saints, guess what, went 11-5 and made the playoffs, and they actually finished in the top 10. It was the only time since Sean Payton and Drew Brees got here that the Saints defense has ever finished in the top 10 in overall defense, and that was Rob Ryan's first year, and then things went really bad after that. So I think the Saints are going to end up in the playoffs this year, and I think that people are going to be really surprised by the way the defense plays and the turnaround that they make from the past 3 seasons when they've been they were ranked 31, 30, and 27 the last 3 years in overall team defense. I think they're going to be back more towards the middle of the pack this year, and the Saints are going to end up in the playoffs when it's all said and done.
I hope I wind up with some char-grilled oysters at some point. Fletcher Mackel joining us from down in beautiful New Orleans, and send me some fried shrimp from the Acme Oyster House, maybe a port-of-call burger, something like that down there off of Bourbon Street. We're missing this trip. It's preseason. Obviously I was terrified from the last time we went down there. And you say, well, what are you going to see? We don't have Flacco playing, and part of the Flacco issue is age, his back. He's getting ready for Cincinnati. There's a lot of conjecture, a lot of weird speculation about why he's he's not practicing. Meanwhile, Brady goes on post 40. Here's Drew Brees at 38. It really is amazing how when you feel that reliable, that you feel like you can count on a 38-year-old quarterback. And I guess Brady and Brees really setting the stage for, I guess, what Rodgers and Ryan and Flacco and some of the rest of these guys. I don't know that Joe Flacco is going to be doing this when he's 38, and certainly not with the level of confidence that it feels as though you have in Drew Brees. And, Brees is the most interesting cat in the world because he was supposed to be done before he ever got to New Orleans, right? Miami, San Diego, they looked at him and said, he'll never make it in this year game, right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, look, San Diego had given up on Drew Brees when they drafted Eli Manning and then traded for Phillip Rivers during the 2004 draft. Drew Brees got drafted in 2001 and had a tough time finding his footing his first 3 years, and that led the Chargers to draft Eli and then trade Eli for Phillip Rivers when Eli said he wouldn't play for San Diego. And then Drew Brees, because Rivers is a holdout, Brees wins the job in 04, and then in 04 and 05 has some fantastic years, and then the final game of the 05 season suffers a horrific shoulder injury where some people said he'd never play again. The Saints and the Miami Dolphins both looking for a quarterback. Nick Saban down in Miami, it was going to be Dante Culpepper with his torn ACL, rehabbing the torn ACL, or Drew Brees rehabbing the shoulder injury, and Saban picked Culpepper, and the rest is history. Drew Brees ended up in New Orleans, and again, if it was a Disney movie, you'd kind of smirk and say that's not true, but a city on the mend, trying to prove itself, ended up with a quarterback on the mend trying to prove himself. The parallels were eerily similar, and it's been something special. But the way Drew Brees takes care of himself, as smart as he is to get rid of the ball so quick, the offense that Peyton utilizes to make sure that he's not holding on to the ball forever, and again, watching how regimented Drew Brees is in what he does. I'm not saying he's going to play till he's 45, but I could certainly see another 3 years at the level that Brady's playing at in potentially longer, especially because the NFL has changed from, maybe when you and I grew up where hard hits on quarterbacks were still the norm. Now, the quarterback is not hit like the rest of the players on the team. And the fact that these guys take care of themselves year round, it certainly benefits the Drew Breeses and the Tom Brady's of the world, and also being with great coaches and great systems and great organizations that know what they are. So, yeah, Drew Brees at 38 seems to be, in no way, shape, or form slowing down or regressing in any way, shape, or form.
Well, we can only hope for that for number 5 around here. Fletcher Mackel joining us here from New Orleans. All right, last preseason game. I mean, some of us are going to watch this crap, as they say. What are the Saints trying to accomplish here? Where are the edges on their roster and the deep concerns they have right now? We have plenty of them on our side.
Well, let me say this. The biggest concern for the Saints is stay healthy. Don't lose anyone. So you're not going to see Brees. You're not going to see Adrian Peterson. You're not going to see Mark Ingram. You're not going to see Cam Jordan. Those guys got their reps last weekend against the Houston Texans. So I doubt you'll see any of those guys. Like the 4th preseason game, I don't think it's any different for the Ravens than it would be for the Saints. It's going to be bubble guys because when they're fleshing out this 53-man roster, usually the final, say, 5 to 7 spots, it's going to be special teams in just kind of gut feeling with what you think, and has a guy done enough. So really, as far as weaknesses go, I can't say that the Saints are still looking to fill weaknesses and address weaknesses. Again, they've added so much depth to their defense. That's really been the story down here. The defensive performance, the defensive dominance, and the depth they've added to that defense. Now what we're looking at is people haven't talked enough about this nationally. The Saints special teams were deplorable last year. They single-handedly lost 3 games against the Giants, against the Broncos when the leaper went over and blocked the extra point and returned it to the game winner at the end of the game. And then against Carolina, the Saints single-handedly lost 3 games on special teams. So they have made a major emphasis. They brought in 2 new special teams coaches, fired the old coaches, and have revamped that unit, so to say. So there are some down-the-line battles with linebackers, safeties, cornerbacks, running backs that those final few precious roster spots are going to come down to special teams. And I think they know what these guys can do on special teams. But if a guy to keep an eye on that's been a really good story is number 99 for the Saints, Adam Big Hill. He's a former Canadian Football League player, MVP of the league defensively, champion with the British Columbia Lions. I think they know what they've got on special teams, but he's going to get a lot of reps defensively. And if he can continue to be this little ball of hustle at 5'9", I think he's a guy who's probably played himself onto the roster. But Thursday night for the Saints is really going to be about the backups in somebody making the most of their opportunity for that final shot to open the coach's eyes and maybe make this team.
Dude, filthy early schedule for them. They open in Minnesota on Monday night, so they'll get a little extra rest. We'll get to sit and watch the game as the early game on the Monday kickoff. Then the Patriots at home, then off to Carolina and Miami. Wow, early bye as well. You know, that's not a nice, you know, we got Cleveland at home week 2, bro. You know, I mean, there's a little bit of that. We got to go to Wembley and play week 3, but we get to play Jacksonville. I mean, it's almost like a AAA game, right?
You're right. And look, here's the thing. The Saints, and Sean Payton says this, again, when you had, you know, a coach and a quarterback and a general manager that have been here for so long, you've got a lot of history to mine, so to say, that you can look back and say, well, when they've done this, they've been successful, and when they haven't done this, they haven't been successful. Sean Payton knows it. When they've started strong, they've had really great seasons. You go back to 2006, the year after Katrina. Started out 3-0, won the NFC South, played in the NFC Championship game. 2009, obviously, was really special. They opened the year 13-0 and won the Super Bowl that year. In 2011, they lost a great game, a grudge match game on Thursday night to the Green Bay Packers, who had just won the Super Bowl. But then the Saints went and won 7 straight games. So they opened the season 8-1 after losing the first game of the year. And then in 2013, the last time they made the playoffs, they opened the season 5-0 before heading into their bye. So when this team has started fast, they have had tremendous success in giving themselves an opportunity at a championship. That being said, every year they've missed the playoffs. You go back to 2007, they started 0-3. 2008, they started 0-3. The last 3 years when they were 7-9, they started, guess what, 0-3. So if they don't get out the gate relatively strong, the season is lost. The one thing with Sean Payton, the season is never completely lost, because even when they start 0-3, they still have finished 7-9 and 8-8 some years. So they battle hard, but they just can't overcome such a slow start. And you look at the beginning of that schedule, Minnesota is an underrated team to me that, you know, at their place is going to be difficult. Then you're right, New England at home. I mean, the Patriots anywhere are tough. Then the Saints have historically struggled at Carolina. It's amazing when you look at Sean Payton versus the Panthers in the division. They own the Panthers at home, and they struggle with them in Charlotte. And so that is not an easy game. And then they go to Wembley to play a Dolphins team that was a playoff team a year ago that I know has a new quarterback with Jay Cutler, but that is not an easy first 4 games in any way, shape, or form, with 3 of those games, you know, being on the road at Minnesota, at Carolina, and then, you know, across the pond, so to say, in London. So it's a brutal start. Now, if the Saints can get to 2-2, then they've got a soft patch in their schedule, so to say, after the bye, where they could potentially get on a real nice run. But if they're 0-4 or 1-3, it could be more of the same, trying to dig out of a hole. They've got to be 2-2. I think most people here would tell you, or 3-1, and then they'll be in great shape. But if they're 1-3 or 0-4 after that tough first quarter of the season, they could be in real trouble.
Obviously, this crazy storm, brewing around in the Gulf has moved a bunch of stuff. Dude, I didn't even realize on Monday. It kind of like slipped past me with everything going on, and I'm not in New Orleans, obviously. The LSU-BYU game was slated to be played in Houston, now moved back to New Orleans. And, storm aside, LSU's a big deal around that part. I mean, that's a big story in your part of the world, and I'm sure LSU might be a bigger story than the Saints in your part of the world, right?
Well, I'll say it's not bigger than the Saints. Baton Rouge is its own market. It's only an hour away from New Orleans, but in that, it's kind of, I guess, like with you all, with Baltimore and D.C. In D.C., their teams are more important in Baltimore as secondary, and vice versa for you all in Baltimore in D.C. So, look, the Saints are 1, LSU is 1A here. Not more important than the Saints or more popular than the Saints, but certainly nothing is secondary to in front of them. Not Tulane, not the Pelicans, nothing else. So yeah, there's a huge interest here, obviously, with Baton Rouge being an hour away and a ton of LSU alumni and fans here in New Orleans. And again, it's an unfortunate situation with what's happening in Houston. And it was one of those neutral site games that have become the norm now. Alabama's playing Florida State in Atlanta. Florida's playing Michigan in the Cowboy Stadium. LSU does this every year. LSU last year went to Lambeau Field and played the University of Wisconsin in a neutral site game. So neutral site games have become kind of the norm for big ticket programs. And LSU was supposed to play BYU in Houston at NRG Stadium, and obviously because of the terrible situation in Houston, they moved that game to the Superdome. So it'll still be 8:30 p.m. Central Time, late kickoff on the East Coast, 9:30 Central Time. But yeah, just an unfortunate situation in Houston, and obviously something everybody here in New Orleans has dealt with. So I think it was easy for the Superdome people to say, if we can help in any way, shape, or form, we certainly will. And the people with the Advocare Texas Kickoff Classic said, we will take you up on your hospitality and in generous offer to move the game to New Orleans, so it's going to be played here on Saturday night.
All right, bro. Stay safe and dry down there, and as long as that storm's circulating around, we have concern for everybody down there. Ravens headed down to New Orleans. Fletcher Mackel does it in New Orleans at WDSU. You can find him at Fletcher WDSU, as well as one of the Saints Hall of Fame committee. And NOLA all the way. Send me some of that good food up here. I mean, we got to cut it out with these preseason games. Get a real game down there so we come down there and have another party. We've got some very fond purple memories down there in New Orleans, as I know you're aware of from our Super Bowl 47 joyous celebration on Poitras down there.
Yeah, it was great. I was in the dome for it. Besides the blackout, it was, once we got past that little situation, it was great having y'all here, and obviously a great moment in your team and city's history. So glad we were part of it, at least as the host city.
I don't know that French boula roulette, let the good times roll, whatever that is. We did that 5 years ago. I'm still having trouble understanding the Cajun language, but I do understand New Orleans and Bourbon Street. So, hey, great to have you on, man. I appreciate the look at all things Saints, and we'll check back in with you later on in the year. Thanks for coming on, Fletch.
No problem. Thank you. And it's Laissez les bon temps rouler. There you go.
Laissez bon temps rouler. Is that right? Did I do it right?
Close enough.
All right. Well, I know what it means in English. And I have taken the advice. Thanks for coming on, Fletch. We'll see you soon, man.
All right.
You got a Fletcher Mackel. He is Fletcher WDSU. I'm not up on my French. I've worked on it. I did spend a couple of days in Paris. I did know how to say merci and bonjour, and I learned a couple of those things. I did look at the menus, and I'm lost. They say Spanish is like French. That's a lie. It's like when I went to Brazil, they said like Portuguese is like Spanish. No, it's not. I'm struggling with my English. You can find me out in the Buy at Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world, including New Orleans. You can find me out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Little weekend of Peter Principles coming your way on the radio as we step out after the storm, as they say, and after the Ravens mess down in New Orleans. And hopefully everybody gets out of there upright, as we've pointed out. Hate these fake football games. It's not, like Luke and I said, hard to watch these, but we'll get through it. We do have some great baseball ahead. And go Terps down there in Texas as well. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.